Case. Order in the court, order in the court. I need to start a new session before it'll bang. Hooray! Hello everybody and welcome back to VR Court. Judge Ekron sitting to hear the crimes against Mr. Dark Edge. For those of you who have just joined us, which let's be fair is nobody, Mr. Dark Edge is accused of the crime of robbery by the prosecution. On the prosecuting stand today we have Mr. J. Dollas, referred to as Mr. Dollas from this point on, and on the defence stand we have Mr. Witherkiller 77, referred to as Mr. Killer from this point on. This is a standard criminal case, at least in VR Court world. There's no legal bearing here, and we are having a jury case, which means the 5 members of the jury, the Master of Portal, Mr. Lucario 9000, that guy Mick, Miss Itiru, and Mr. Spret will be the ones who actually decide the fate of the accused. Although the court procedure will be the same as it always has been, including Judge's summary, these 5 will be going into the back room to determine your fate. When that happens, I will assign one of you as a speaker of the group and will give you the instructions you need to follow. I will politely request that the prosecution, the jury avoid asking questions and potentially perjuring themselves by making statements like, he's guilty as fucking sin because he's an SCP, or stuff like that. I would also politely request that they sit patiently and calmly and just enjoy themselves because we're here for a laugh. Now, I'm aware that most people heard the speech in relation to the procedure of court and the objection rules the last time around. However, Mr. Dollas, if I recall correctly, joined us after that had happened, so therefore I'm not 100% sure he actually knows the rules. And so for the benefit of everybody, as I always do when we start a court case, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go over all of those fucking rules again. And I am going to finally shut up. I'm going to... Yes, thank you, Mr. Darkedge. I'm going to do this. I'm going to walk to my kitchen without taking my headset off because the cables are that long. I'm going to reach into the fridge and I'm going to get that. Koppenberg. Right, that's there. Now, where the fuck did I put... there's a bottle opener. Come here, Mr. Bottle Opener. I need you. Yes, drop everything. That's it. I'm going to need some alcohol for this case, I'm sure. And to return... Oh, there we go. Oh. Right, sorry about that. It's been a long day. Oh, God. Oh, I need that. Right. And now you can be assured that your judge is drinking, which means this is going to be a really weird case. So, without any further ado, and apologies for my terrible behaviour there, I'm going to lend the floor to Mr. Dollas to make his opening statement to the court. Mr. Dollas, if you'd be so kind to take a stand and make your opening statement for the court.
As you know, Mr. Edge has been accused of robbery. And I will be showing all of the evidence to ensure that he has his last meal. Miss Edge.
Okay.
There was an ad.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dollas, for your opening statement. A lot of confidence in the lawyer there. Certain that we're going to make sure Mr. Dark Edge has his last meal. Terrifying. Mr. Dollas, before we continue, might I politely request, is this your first court case on the stand, by any chance?
This is my first court case.
Not a problem, I say. I've already said I do love seeing the new lawyers flap their wings for the first time and occasionally faceplant entertainingly. Hopefully you won't be doing that. Mr. Killer, I'm lending you the floor now to make your opening statement for the court, if you be so kind.
Very well. I hope that Edge isn't guilty today. And all that, you know. I know him for quite a bit, and I am proud to be his defendant. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Killer, and you reveal you know the accused personally. I'm sure that's going to play in somehow, but thank you for your opening statement, lawyers. Before I carry on, of course, Mr. Killer, is this your first case as a lawyer on the stand?
I believe this is my second time.
Ooh.
It's been a little bit.
Do I get to be rude and ask if you won the last case you took part in?
It's been a while, I don't really remember.
We'll call that one a draw then. Well, we have 2 fairly fresh and green guild lawyers fighting it out to the death to see if Mr. Dark Edge dies. So I'm loving this already. So knowing that we've heard the opening statements from the lawyers and they're both fairly interesting, I shall waste no further time wasting your time talking shit to hand the floor over to Mr. Witherkiller as the defence to make his full and frank case using all of the evidence that has been made available to him. Mr. Killer, please tell me the number you wish to bring up in reference to your evidence, and don't forget the audio. A beep boop. The floor is yours.
Very well. Very well. I'd like to point out case number 7 is the ticket that he used. It's the ticket, not the movie ticket, but the theater ticket that he used to go to the theater at the time of the robbery, or maybe before it. This was exchanged at the time of the robbery. Got it before the robbery. And for number 9 is the identification, or the room card used to get in and out of his hotel room. It has the numbers, or it has the time when it was used.
Does it?
And the last thing I'd like to show is on number 8 is the comb that he uses, but he combs it every day because he has to keep his hair nice and straight. Because it would mess up his hair. So he used it before the theater, and then the ticket during the theater, and then his card after the theater. That's all I have to say for now.
Objection.
Go ahead with your objection. Mr. Dollas, I must politely remind you to follow the rules of objections, but I'll let it slide this time. This is your first time. But go ahead with your objection, Mr. Dollas.
As you know, this so-called Mr. Edge has no hair. Therefore, how would he be able to comb his hair?
He has chest hair?
It is just a blank image on his chest of just a I don't know what that is on his chest.
Mr. Darkedge, would you please approach the bar, which means come over here so I can see you closely. Stand up, old boy, so I can see you. What's that growing out of your head?
What?
What's that growing out of your head, Mr. Edge? All that black stuff, what is it?
It's not.
Can't hear him.
No, I don't think he's communicating. Mr.
Don't look at me. I don't know what it is.
Maybe it's hair?
He says he doesn't know.
He doesn't know what's growing out of his head. Very well, in that case, the objection is an interesting but semi-valid one, if we don't know what's actually physically growing out of his hair. Incidentally, Mr. Killer, heads or tails?
Heads.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Edge, you may return to your seat. Thank you. Right, Mr. Killer, do you have anything else to add to your case? I got a little confused with that objection.
I have no more to show.
Okay, the last thing I'm going to ask you one question is, you said it had the times on it that he entered and left his room. Could you give us one of the times that's relevant to the case, please?
It's 11:36 a.m. after the theater play is when he entered his hotel room.
11:36 a.m. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, fairly short but interesting case as presented there by the prosecution, focusing very heavily on the alibi. I was not around at the time, so I'll be curious to see how Mr. Dollas, counters this one. So therefore, I'm going to hand the floor over to Mr. Dollas to make his full and frank case as he sees fit, using all of the evidence. Mr. Killer, you may object as you see fit, following the objection rules. Mr. Dollas, the floor, it belongs to you.
So, I would like to go to camera 1 to show one piece of evidence I've gotten. As you know, there's a lot of money on this camera. The defendant had, if he had all this money right now, Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry. Just give me a sec.
That's all right, Mr. Dollas. Take your time. There's no pressure in this courtroom. You'd know about it if there was.
Yeah. So, all this money. As you know, on the news, you have seen countless crimes going on, such as the robbery of the Tunisian diamond, and I think it was a man trying to break into a bank in the southern south of, California?
Did you-
And
Hold it. I worked with the general at the time, after the events, and I've gotten a pardon.
And Mr.
Which
Killer,
you've gotten a
delete-
pardon.
Mr. Killer, we have objection rules which you have failed to follow. Now I'm going to let you off as I let him off on his first objection rule follows, but please remember the objection rules.
I
I'm
will.
going to allow your objection. Mr. Killer, if you'd be so kind.
Yes. I've gotten a pardon from when I was with the armory, when I took out an airship from the Karpak clan. And the pardon gets rid of all of my crimes that I've done. That's all I have to say.
That is not what I've heard. I've heard two different stories. One, you became the leader of the Top Hat clan. And two, you stole the Romanian ruby from the Top Hat clan. So are you trying to say that you are a convicted felon, Mr. Killer?
Well,
This
my
isn't your first
case
time
is...
in court.
This is my second time, but yes.
Your third time, as a matter of fact, but your second time as a lawyer.
My case does not have to rely on to the Edge's case right here.
Right, I'm going to interject here and say we're getting a little bit off track. We'll sentence Mr. Killer to death after this, as his pardon doesn't hold any freedom or sentence in VR court. But for the moment in time, we're getting very heavily off track here and not focusing on the crime at hand, which is the crime of Mr. Dark X's robbery. I assume the point we were talking about how this was most likely money that was stolen by the accused, but I will allow the prosecution to continue with their case. Thank you for your rather honest objection, Mr. Killer. I'll find a painful way to kill you later. Carry on, Mr. Dollas.
As you know, as I was saying, is there's been countless robberies going on lately, and the latest robbery has been of a theater. Mr. Defendant, I would like to ask, where exactly was this theater?
It was down the Paula Street. Boston.
If I were to interrupt for a moment, this isn't necessarily witness questioning, but I understand that was a context question to the case, so some street in Boston I'm going to take that as. Focus on your case, Mr. Dollas. Rather than asking questions for the moment in time, you will get the opportunity to question the witnesses and the accused in the next section of court.
Yeah.
Carry on.
There has been found, there was a bag in the alleyway. Did you say Polo Street? Or nah, it's questioning, nah. Whatever street you said, I can't remember, and my memory is a bit foggy. I do remember the street did start with a P.
We shall refer to it as Whatever Street, Boston from this point forward. The theatre on Whatever Street, Boston. Carry on.
Alright. I think this medication hit it. But, yeah. As you know, there's been a bag found in the alleyway of Whatever Boston. And that bag has been filled with 2 balaclavas, 2 revolvers, and that's pretty much it in the duffel bag, but there was also another duffel bag in there.
Right, okay. And Mr. Dollis, I am thinking of a number between 1 and 10. What number am I thinking of?
4.
Okay, carry on with your case, Mr. Dollis.
May you move on to camera 2, please?
Camera number 2 is on the screen.
As you know from the audio file that you've given me, the defendant's ringtone was...
This is well before your time, so don't worry about not knowing what it is. If you're talking, I can't hear you.
And as you know, that was the defendant's ringtone. But it is crap. There was 2 phones. One was attached to a bomb, I believe, and the other one as a diversion in the theater. About 25% of the theater was blown up during that robbery.
Bless you.
It was made as so the witness, or Mr. Edge, could get in there with no people noticing him. He grabbed the money and went. This phone was used to detonate the bomb that was off inside the theater. Camera number 3, please. This revolver was used at the robbery in case there were any meddling policemen ready to fire. And as you know, the gun does have fingerprints on it. I've seen many markings on it. Many markings. The markings of which being Mr. Edge.
Right. Before you carry on, Mr. Dollis, as you have made that accusation, then we must bring up the fingerprint scanner. A absolutely paternally wonderful device that is so fantastic we don't even need to get Mr. Edge to press it. Mr. Tiro, thank you. I know you're a member of the jury, but I am the court assistant as well. So what I have here is this fantastic piece of technology that I dropped, as you may be aware. This technology already has his fingerprints in and the fingerprints recovered from the gun. All I need to do is attune it to work correctly, even though my face is wrong. This is how you deal with delicate technology in courtroom. It's very, very important that you do it properly. If you do it incorrectly, your face ends up like mine. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to push the registration button. It did it automatically there, so I'm going to do it again. I'm going to push the registration button. We'll see if Mr. Darkedge's fingerprints were found on this gun. No, that's not how you do it. Go on. Well, it's an identification fail, meaning that Mr. Darkedge's fingerprint slash paw print fingers slash oily skin slash whatever it is we're using to identify him was not found on this particular... That says identify, but that doesn't count. This particular firearm. Carry on with your case, Mr. Dollis.
So, to add on to the gun thing, maybe the defendant was wearing gloves. And maybe those markings on the gun were probably just my fingerprints because, you know, I'm wearing gloves here, but my fingers are still...
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on, Mr. Dollis.
Yeah. May you move to camera 4, please?
Number 4. Oh my. My childhood. Where did you go?
As you know, the police have went to the theater, and the CCTV camera had not captured. It had captured stuff, you know, ID stuff, but what it didn't do is get the audio. The audio captured on this floppy disk and this VHS tape, or cassette tape, however you want. the audio recalls a 44 Magnum going off, and I believe a E226. And a deceased officer Johnson said, "Fall back," right after hearing it. I don't know how to explain the noise. Just imagine just a bullet just hitting somebody in right in next to the cheek, and then scraping by their face.
Might be able to find that noise on there.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that bring your case to a close then, Mr. Dollass?
That does.
Lovely. Well, in that case, then, thank you for your case. A very interesting one as presented, and by the defence as well. We've got your standard wasn't there, and we've got your not standard planned job with 2 people involved, including bombs, explosives, shooting of police officers, and very strange ringtones that nobody who actually lived in that time ever want to fucking hear again, as long as they goddamn exist. But unfortunately, because some guy on VRchat found it, you have to listen to it. Some other sound effects were mentioned there as well. I wonder if we can find them in the random thing. Can we find them? I'm rickrolling you, and what are you going to do about it? Right, that's enough of that shit. So, we shall now move on to witness questioning. As I said, we have 2 witnesses here, Mr. Darkedge and Mr. Pelrix. Mr. Darkedge, of course, is the accused, although has shown an unwilling desire to not communicate with us, which I suppose is passable. And Mr. Pelrix is Mr. Edge's roommate. So, Mr. Doras, as the prosecutor, which witness would you like to call to the stand first? You have Mr. Pelrix or Mr. Edge?
Mr. Pelrix.
Mr. Pelrix, very well. The roommate of the accused, Mr. Edge, if you would please take a seat with your lawyer, that would be much appreciated. Go and sit with your lawyer. Mr. Pelrix, if you'd be kind enough to take a seat. Yes, you know what it is. Lovely. Right, now before we can move on to the witness testimony and questioning, Mr. Pelrix must be sworn in. I have the feeling that I'm going to really take advantage of this terrible music, I'm afraid. Mr. Pelrix, to the theme of Rick Astley. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to... I've dropped it! I've dropped it! Oh, God! Following not the theme of Rick Astley, Mr. Pelrix, all you need to do is repeat the phrase after me. Are you ready?
Yes, Your Honour.
I, Pelrix 13FB...
I, Pelrix 13FB...
promise to tell the truth...
promise to tell the truth...
the whole truth...
the whole truth...
and nothing but the truth...
and nothing but the truth.
Lest I have to explain...
lest I have to explain...
to a bunch of Italians...
sorry?
To a bunch of Italians...
to a bunch of Italians...
why fried meat inside a sheep's stomach...
why fried meat inside a sheep's stomach...
is actually pretty fucking tasty.
is actually pretty fucking tasty.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Very good. We got through that without any kills from the witness and everything. Right. Mr. Pelrix, as I've mentioned, you were the roommate of the accused. Now, I don't know exactly what your witness testimony is going to be, whether it is an existence of how he is to live with, his personality, or perhaps you were on the hotel visit and theatre visit with him. But if you will be kind enough to give us your witness testimony, whatever it may be, the court awaits.
Of course, Your Honour. Now, my roommate, Mr. Edge, he's a very, how about this? Interesting character in the way that he's not very talkative at all. He often leaves dishes lying around, leaves me to do stuff, and only shouts to me if it's to do with his favourite TV show or stuff that he cares about, which quite frankly, I don't. Now, I can tell you, I went to this theatre trip with him. We flew all the way over from where was I again? Ah, yes. We flew all the way over from New York to Boston in order to go watch this new movie he was really wanting, The Room 2. I thought it was absolutely rubbish, but because I thought that the film was absolutely rubbish, I decided to leave with his keycard. Now, he asked me to go back to his house, hence why I had the keycard,
It's not there.
to go and collect his bags and stuff to help him out when he was busy doing things. Well, by things, I mean sitting around, buying more popcorn and food because he's a greedy, fat, person. Now, I entered his room at precisely 11:36, and I managed to find what seemed to be a replica of an AK-47, one of those little orange tip guns. It was a nice, big, fancy-looking thing. And I thought I'd be a bit suspicious because I'd never been in his room before. And I found sheets all over the wall, stuff about do this, do that, contact this guy, that guy, whoever they bloody were. And all of a sudden, as I'm going back to the hotel, I see a big mass explosion. And it's around the theatre park, so I'm going around. I ran in to check. Fuck, Edge, you're right, mate. And I see him. He's running out of the place. He looks all covered in blood. He's covered in smoke. He looks like me after a fucking Friday night kebab. No very good at all. No, of course. I dragged him away. I dragged him away. He didn't seem to be doing very good. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't breathing. He was just begging, help, 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 help. You know, fucking like a wee broken record.
I'll be
and
back
all
in
of a sudden,
2
we
minutes.
Carry on, Mr. Riggs.
We kept on hearing gunshots through the place. We heard the guy screaming, get back, get back. I want to see him get his fucking head flopped open. Excuse my swearing, Your Honour. Am I allowed to swear, by the way?
Knock yourself out, you're Scottish, ain't you? I can't stop you. Like Australian.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Dickface. Your Honour, I mean. Now, as I was dragging him away back, we saw two guys running through the theatre. One of them seemed to be a hostage, because he was trying to run away from the guy with a mask. But whoever he was, well, he wasn't exactly in a good mood, because he got his fucking stomach cut open. Now, after that we had a second explosion go off around the other side of the theatre. We did not see anyone come out, however we saw the masked assailant run towards it as though he was waiting for something or someone, only for him to then manage to make his escape. Mr. Edge and I got back in the car and returned to our hotel room by around 1 PM.
Well, that's interesting. Not where I was expecting that to go. But very well. Incidentally, I find you guilty of being a dick and sentencing you to have your penis cut off and shoved down your throat. Mr. Joas, would you like to ask the witness any questions in relation to his testimony?
So, as that car was driving, you know what kind of car was it?
I was driving a Ford Fiesta.
What was the license plate?
G634AIH8C. Oh, and it has a little love heart in the 8, because you know we're homo that way.
It seems that it was last seen at a barn?
A bar.
A barn. Where exactly was this car after it was drove? Did they take it to a barn? And
I'm sorry, whose car are you talking about? Mine?
the Ford Fiesta.
Aye, my car. We drove back to our hotel room.
The hotel. Oh, I forgot the love heart. Last seen Boston Hotel.
Yes.
Okay. And you said your roommate was covered in blood.
No. Well, actually, yes, I forgot. Excuse me, I don't know why I said no. Yes, he was covered in blood. He was a wee bit roughed up for the blast, like he would be.
And there was also a hostage running out.
Yes, and then he get fucking gutted.
By Mr. Edge.
No, Mr. Edge, another guy. We don't know who. All I know is that I thought it'd be important to the case, to let you know that this guy's a murderer as well. No, that it's very irrelevant, but you know, I'm running out of things to say.
There was 2 people who robbed the place. Mr. Judge,
Yes.
would you mind playing the... Would you mind me bringing the evidence and playing the audio clip?
Bringing the evidence in and playing the audio clip? Oh. How does this work, old boy?
The audio clip, as you know, these tablets are new abilities. So if I could transfer his voice just from them hearing it.
I don't think I can let that necessarily pass because of... It doesn't feel very fair, personally.
Alright.
Right, I wonder if I could
by the-
potentially, whilst we wait for the defence lawyer to return, if I could ask a few clarifying questions from Mr. Pelrix, because there's a few things I wish to clarify as the judge, perhaps for the audience as well. Mr. Pelrix, you say when you entered the hotel, the time you mentioned laid up to there, which is fine, using his key card. What did you say you found on the walls and in the room?
Notes and newspaper clippings of the hotel. Details about where things were kept and people who were hiring and firing.
How long had Mr. Edge been in that hotel for?
We arrived about 2 nights previous.
Why would Mr. Edge have a fake AK-47 in his room?
Well, like I said before, he's a bit of an interesting character. He likes edgy, violent, psycho stuff. He's one of those people who thinks he's a psychopath just because he doesn't like bugs. He likes to practice like guns and collect weapons. He's edgy that way, you know.
At the theatre, you said that you found Mr. Dark Edge and pulled him away and he wasn't in a good place at the time?
That is correct.
What did you do after you pulled him away?
Well, I simply took him to the car, sat him down. I treated his wounds for a wee bit because he was fucking screaming at me, "Help me! Help me!" and all that stuff as though it was my fault. But after that we just drove right back to the hotel. Not much, it was just awkward silence. He didn't want to talk about it.
Okay, I wanted to get that clarifying information out of the way because I was a little bit confused as to if you were talking about some random person who dragged away or if Mr. Edge was involved in the gunfight in your opinion or if he was dark and edgy, which he certainly is dark. I don't know if he's edgy, but okay. I'm going to play as Mr. Killer, have you returned from your eternal slumber of death? The answer is no.
By the way, Ekron,
Hello.
just in case I have to like leave before the score ends, you said you had a YouTube channel? Yeah.
Yes, just Ekron Vulture. It will appear. It covers a lot of weird shit, so yeah, have fun with that. Right,
awesome.
well, the court will proceed forward. We have lost a member of the jury, unfortunately, so we're in a bit of an awkward situation, but I'm sure we can cover with that. The gentleman had to go, and we, of course, do not stop anybody if they have to go. I might join in the jury, who knows. Right! Mr. Killer, I know you may not have heard all of the testimony, but I'm going to invite you to ask questions of the witness. So if you'd like to ask him any questions, now is the time to do it, old boy.
I have a couple questions.
Go
if
ahead.
you flew from New York to Boston, how would you have heard the explosion? From what you just said.
Because like I was driving to the theater when I heard the explosion. Like, oh, he's left.
But you said that after you put in the card.
Yes. No, I didn't say that.
Alright, up to my second question. If you were in his room and saw morbid things, why didn't you bring up further evidence, like pictures and photographs, or maybe even some drawings of what you saw?
Well, because I didn't think it'd be right to go through all his private stuff. Plus, he didn't really have many photos. It was just photos of places we were already at, which I thought, oh, what's the point in that? So I just threw them in the bin afterwards.
Good enough? I believe that's all the questions I'll ask for today.
Okay, well in that case then, I'm going to thank Mr. Riggs for his testimony and dismiss him back to the gallery. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Riggs. The court does not offer any kind of counselling, we just cut your testicles off if you complain, so don't ask for it. Thank you, off you go. Pip pip, pip pip.
Oh, how sweet.
Right! Now of course we have one more witness who is the accused himself, Mr. Edge. Mr. Edge, would you please take a seat on the accused stand with all your not hair? Now, Mr. Edge, of course, during this point you must communicate in humanoid language that we can understand. Before you can be sworn in for testimony, you must do the Pledge of Honesty. Are you ready? I'll take that as a yes. I, Dr. K-E69E, promise to tell the truth.
I, Dr. 6, promise.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Lest I am made
What?
lest I am made
Lest I am made
to clean the floor
to clean the
using my tongue
thing my tongue
after winner has failed
after winter has failed.
to hit the bowl again. So help me God.
So help me.
Very well. Right, Mr. Edge, I understand there's a few communication issues here for reasons I won't exactly go into, but we'll carry on. Mr. Edge, could you give your testimony as to what happened on that day at the theatre, please?
First of all, went to the theater, but I saw two different look identical. I don't know why, but also in the theater. Didn't think any of they would do something. Me or roommate. We went in. Then explosion happened. I got knocked out. Get that?
You fell out and I got knocked out and I haven't heard anything since, old boy.
Yeah, I think I heard that he got knocked out by the explosion.
That was as far as we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mic is glitching out.
We know.
And that's really... Well, actually, then I will...
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Edge. It must be difficult to bring such painful thoughts back to the forefront of your mind. I appreciate that. Now, I feel because of some of the difficulty in communication that witness questioning may not necessarily be required here. So I'm going to ask, Mr. Doras, is there anything you actually wish to ask the accused?
No, I was going to thank him for not doing this.
Very well. Mr. Killer, is there anything you actually wish to ask the accused?
There's nothing too specific I would like to ask him. But...
Okay.
my dogs. Alright.
That's cool. Well, in that case, with no disrespect to you, Mr. Edge, due to the slight problem in communication, I'm going to cut anything else short and we'll have no questions from you in that point, so please remain where you're seated. Mr. Winner, I can see you standing over there. I'm going to ask you to come and join the jury, please, as you have seen most of the case.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Lovely, we are now back up to 5 jury members, Mr. Winner being the new one, and then Abysmal. Right, Mr. Thury, would you mind looking for my hammer, please? Oh, it's down there. Somebody's picked it up. I once again thank you for your testimony for the witnesses. A very comprehensive and interesting witness testimony from Mr. Palebricks. I remembered what I deem important in it, and Mr. Edge providing a fairly collaborative statement there. So now we're going to move on to the last facet of court, which is, of course, amendments. A nice simple section here. If you wish to make any amendments to your case, having found new evidence from witness testimony or anything else brought up, now is the time to do it. So, Mr. Dollas, do you have any amendments you wish to make to your court case this fine day? So, no amendments on the defence or the prosecution. Quite a bit of distraction there, but stranger things have happened. So, having heard all that, we shall move on to the last facet of court at this point, which is, of course, closing statements. Closing statements being a short, concise, and sweet statement about your case, a quick summing up as to why they are or not guilty and your evidence. There are no objections during the closing statements, so I'm going to hand Mr. Dollas the floor to present his closing statement to the court. Mr. Dollas, your closing statement, if you don't mind.
Mr. Edge has been accused of a armed robbery with a 44 Magnum revolver with a getaway driver driving a Ford Fiesta. It is known that there were sticky notes and an AK-47 inside of his room. There were also floor plans of places that they have already been to. If they had already been to there, why would he have floor plans? I'm just not going to ask questions, because this is the closing statement. So, as you know, the witness was just accused of many things. There was also a hostage that was killed and a person that was downed. There were some casualties that they had to go through, so therefore there is actually 2 charges here: murder and robbery. What I'm trying to say is the defendant robbed the theater, so then he could pay for the hotel. Because it turns out that the defendant was living in a trailer with his mom. And his roommate, aka his friend, moved in. Then they decided they were going to take a trip with all the money that they gathered up, because he wanted to see his favorite play. And after he would see his favorite play, he would rob the place. So then he could afford everything and have enough stuff to pay for everything, his family and an honorable man, but not in the correct way.
Okay.
My statement is...
Thank you for your closing statement, Mr. Dollas. A fairly interesting one. Normally don't bring up new evidence in closing statements and accusations, but I'll let it slide today because first-time lawyers do that sort of thing, and it's fine. Mr. Wither, Mr. Killer, Mr. whatever I'm calling you now, I'm going to lend you the floor to make your closing statement to the court in this beautiful case. Mr. Jazz, I will politely request you return to the gallery, not up here. Respawn, old boy. Go ahead, Mr. Killer.
Alright. But the accusations that you have given, only a few are false. One is the gun, with the fingerprints, which are not known to be his. And the timing of when he was put in the room, it was his card only. But I do believe that Palebricks has a card of his own, and he probably wasn't there at the time. But he was, like, someone nearby. And all is fair, I do believe he did visit at the time, but he was also knocked out. And maybe Palebricks was with him, putting him on his bed. Or no, not, like, used his card to get inside, put him on his bed, and then he experienced the room that he was in. But there's not much that I have to say. But that's all I got.
Okay then, Mr. Witherkiller. In that case, thank you kindly for your closing statements, lawyers. I'm pleased that we've had a fairly long case here, a very interesting witness testimony. Now, without further ado, let's move on to Judge's summary, the funnest part of the case. Mr. Dolas, do take a seat, old boy. So we'll start with the defence's case. I don't believe everything was in order. Where the fuck has most of the evidence gone? Oh, it was on 7, 8, and 9? What a weird. Anyway, we start on number 8 right here, which was a ticket used to get into the theatre, used by Mr. Edge. Necessarily to see a play at first, and then it was alleged to be a movie later on. This will have been used in the morning, as the defence alleged that this was used to go and see a movie, and then he went back to his hotel room, which is number 9, I believe it was, this one right here, and used this keycard to enter the room. There is a timestamp on this keycard saying the room was entered at 11:36, which is entirely correct, as he won the, I can't remember if it was I think it was a heads or tails, and he won that one, so that information was necessarily correct. Although in witness testimony, this came up as actually being Mr. Palebricks entering the room and not Mr. Edge, which is interesting because it's very much counter to what happened to the defence's story, and he never technically amended it to match the witness testimony, but I'm willing to believe what was put forward there. And then the last piece of evidence in the case was this beautiful comb, which is allegedly used to comb the hair of Mr. Edge, although it was undeterminable in court if Mr. Edge actually has hair. Mr. Edge was unable to confirm if he has hair. No kind of testing was done to have hair, so we have determined that he does not have hair. Therefore, this is a fairly irrelevant point. However, Mr. Palebricks, in his witness testimony, did bring up that Mr. Edge is very much dark and edgy fellow, and might just want to brush the absolute nothing, because that's dark and edgy. It's like me brushing my arms, because obviously that's dark and edgy. So, a bit of a pointless piece of evidence there, but I suppose it brings up the character that he went back to his hotel room to do this. So, you have this general, went to see a movie, went back to his hotel room, brushed his hair at the time of the robbery. Fair enough, a nice simple case as presented by the defence. Sometimes that's all you need to win a case. Moving on now to the prosecution's case, and what a long and interesting case this was. This was a large amount of money that was found. Now, it wasn't 100% actually specified where this money was found, or if this money was actually found on Mr. Edge, as the prosecution went on a bit of a tangent about another criminal who is going to be sentenced to death shortly after this case is finished, even though he has a pardon, but that doesn't count in VR court, of course, and other robberies that have been going on, a bank robbery, a museum robbery, some other kind of robberies. So I'm assuming the link here is that Mr. Edge could also be a robber if other such horrific robberies are going on in the world, but he was never necessarily pointed out or proven that this was money that he had at any time stolen. So an interesting tangent by the prosecution, but not the most relevant straight off the beat if you ask me. The next piece of evidence was this mobile telephone, and this was an important piece of evidence as he received a phone call. In fact, there were a couple of things linked to this. It received a phone call, which of course had the ringtone of the critical piece of evidence, which was not brought up by the defence, which I was rather disappointed about, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to throw the whole device at you. I don't know where that's gone. I assume it's exploded somewhere. Oh my hell,
It went behind you.
It's there. Can somebody... where's my gavel? There's my gavel! So, and apparently this was also linked to 2 explosive devices that when he made the phone call detonated inside the theatre, causing huge explosion and panicking and fear, and the kind of reaction you get when somebody you don't particularly like walks into a VR chat room and you're just like, oh god, or one of the jurors somehow ends up back down there rather than being up here. So, yeah, an interesting piece of evidence, but once again, they're 100% linked to the accused as such via fingerprint or phone ID or anything along those lines. Never looked at the photos internally, nothing like that, but that's fair. Here we had a revolver that was allegedly used. Now, there was mention of a duffel bag as well. I'll bring that up in a minute. This is the revolver that was allegedly used by the accused in the robbery to hold people up. But as we know, the fingerprints of the accused, or the oil prints, or the shadow prints, or whatever he has, were not found on this weapon, meaning that the weapon cannot directly be linked to the accused in this case. Now, allegedly there are 2 robbers, so it is possible that this was the weapon used by the second robber, but can't necessarily be linked to the accused currently as it stands. That was number 3, yes, and number 4. This was the interesting one because this was audio surveillance footage and CCTV that survived the explosion, completely labelled up on a Rick Astley tape cassette. I'm rather pleased that Mr. Doras corrected himself when he said VHS and then corrected himself to cassette. That shows an excellent level of knowledge for somebody younger of such old technology, which I have a big fancy for, because as you know, I collect old camcorders because I'm a fucking idiot. But allegedly the sound was captured on these devices, which included 2 gunshots, I believe it was, a woman being eviscerated, screaming, and explosive noises. We have accepted this as fact, indicating that yes, there was a big explosion, and that was that. So that was roughly the prosecution's case. We then moved on to the witness questioning. Now, occasionally witness questioning is a rather mundane affair that not much happens with, and sometimes it's a particularly interesting affair where everything goes wrong, much like me having the wrong thing selected. And, well, we didn't really question Mr. Darkedge, although what he said was very complimentary to Mr. Belrix, who gave us a very long story. He's flown in, he's known him for a while, he's edgy and dark and a bit weird, thank you kindly. Edgy and dark and a bit weird, and he's flown in, so he took him to the theatre to see this movie he really wanted to see, not a play he really wanted to see. An interesting contradiction there, once again not picked up by the defence. Quite early in the morning, let's be fair, theatre doesn't tend to kick off at 10 in the morning. I'm a theatre guy, I should know this. It tends to be in the evening. But then he went back to the hotel room, let himself in with the room key of Mr. Edge, which would indicate the time, 11:36, was brought up. I wonder why that keeps happening. I'm going to hold on to this now. I've got a hammer. Brought that up, went inside the room, loads of notes on the wall, really weird, fake AK-47, very odd, like he was planning something, but then when Mr. Pelrix headed back to the theatre for some reason, what the fuck is going on with that hammer? When Mr. Pelrix returned to the theatre for some reason, boom! Big naff-off explosion, and he came across Mr. Darkedge quite severely wounded, dragged him away whilst Mr. Darkedge is basically screaming, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me! Mr. Pelrix unfortunately got to witness a rather, I don't know why it keeps launching itself, I think it's broken. Got to I'm just going to hold this here, I'll tell you wait a minute. Got to witness a woman having her stomach cut open, somebody being shot, a hostage running away. Quite horrific sight, but in general, and I found this a little bit odd personally, a little bit odd myself, is that Mr. Pelrix, after he got Mr. Edge inside his car, provided first aid, fair enough, and then didn't take him to the hospital despite being involved in an explosion or stick around to see the police or do any kind of reporting along these lines whatsoever, just took him back to the hotel room. And I find this a very interesting tangent because it's you bastard! Mr. Stretch, you're a very, very naughty girl. Bitch! I'm going to throw this at you now. God damn it!
Murderer the entire time.
I hate you. Anyway, the point I was making was, I find it a little bit oh my god! I find it a little bit suspect that Mr. Pelrix didn't attempt to communicate with the police or go and get medical aid for his assistant and just happened to show up at the time of the explosions and witness these things. Now, there wasn't any CCTV captured, so, and there was no kind of evidence done, so it's a bit weird, but it is what it is. The point of a duffel bag found outside with 2 guns, 2 balaclavas and so forth were found outside, but it was determined by the police, aka the numbers game, that it was not relevant to the case in this particular case, and somebody had just been very clumsy with their BB gear. Don't leave your guns out in public, children, even your BB guns. Now, the next thing we'll be doing is having Mr. Sprett executed for horrific crimes after this, but that is my rough judge's summary. And it's been a very interesting case. I've rather enjoyed this one. So at this point, we have a slightly different jury. Mr. Optimus Winner. Actually, I think Mr. Optimus Winner is the only one who's joined us, as we have lost 1 jury member, which is excellent. So we do have a slightly different jury, but everybody has more or less seen it. I think Mr. Sprett joined us as well. I don't remember. I don't care. So I'm going to be dismissing the jury to make their decisions. I will be giving the head speaker role to... who wants it? Mr. Sprett, you're going to be the head speaker. So what's going to happen is you're going to retire into the back evidence room at this point, and you are going to debate amongst yourselves, once I dismiss you of course, as to why they are guilty. Mr. Sprett, behave. Then, when you are done, you're going to return in here and take a seat.
the camera.
And for the hell of it, I'm not going to join you. So the jury is now dismissed to go into the back room to discuss their case. The jury, you may go and discuss your case. If the jury could please take their seats. Mr. Sprett, as the assigned speaker, has the jury come to a verdict on the accused, Mr. Edge.
Yeah, we just mixed up the name. As
Very well,
before,
Mr.
we were 4-1 on Mr. Edge. The judge has come to the conclusion that Mr. Edge is guilty for his crimes. And that Mr. what's Paul?
The hell?
What's the name? Palorix is guilty for driving a soccer mom's car. But he should be executed as well.
Okay, thank you kindly, jury. If you will be kind enough to please sit yourselves down. Mr. Edge, if you be kind enough to please take your seat back on the accused stand. Somebody fetch me my judgment hammer. Right then, on the basis of the verdict given by the...
Okay, this time it wasn't
I am so close to fucking kicking you right now. Give me
This
my
time it
fucking
wasn't
hammer. Give me my fucking hammer now.
I'm scared.
You don't let it go, please.
No.
There we go.
No.
Right.
But you really need it though because
But-
You cheap butthole.
On the judgment of the
I
accused,
use chapstick. Chapsticks for users.
right, on the basis that the accused has been found guilty by the jury, might I politely request the gallery be quiet? I therefore have no choice but to sentence Mr. Dark Edge to death by having his entrails pulled out and slowly eaten by crows. As his accomplice, Mr. Pelrix, has been found guilty of crimes that he was not accused of, I find him guilty of the crimes he's not accused of and sentence him to be executed by having his eyeballs gouged out and then put into a maze where there's a lot of high explosives if he goes the wrong way. I find Mr. Witherkiller, 77, as a known felon to be guilty of felonious crimes and to be executed by being put into a pencil sharpener and turned around until his body does not exist. I find Mr. Dollhouse guilty of being a lawyer and therefore sentence him to death by being sent to fight in the Ukraine. I sentence Mr. Spret to death for being a pain in the ass by having this hammer shoved so far up his fucking arsehole his intestines come out. And I sentence the other members of the jury to community service, setting up the fucking explosive mines and everything for him to go through because they're shit at their jobs. Case fucking dismissed.
Hey, Mr. Judge.